Hello. Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. We have a really good show for you today. We're going to talk about Matt Gaetz. All these accusations against Matt Gaetz. He's accused of sex trafficking. He's accused, I think, of just having funny looking eyebrows. That's one of the accusations from the left. But we are going to untangle exactly who is behind the accusations against Matt Gaetz, because when you hear the whole story written out in a timeline of exactly what happened when it happened, it is quite a phenomenal story that shows you exactly why President Trump appointed or nominated Matt Gaetz to be Attorney General. So you're gonna wanna buckle up for this one. We're also gonna talk about what the heck is happening in Pennsylvania. I mean, it was funny the day after the election when Trump won in such a humongous landslide, even in the popular vote, not just the Electoral College. There were a bunch of Democrats on X specifically who were like, all right, those of you on the right who were worried about election integrity, are you finally going to admit that your fears were unfounded? And I laughed when I saw those because I was like, yeah, no. The only reason that the cheating wasn't as prevalent is because of two things, really. Because Trump won in such a landslide, there wasn't that margin of cheating. And because Laura Trump was prepared with her cadre of lawyers to litigate every abnormality. But then, of course, we have Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, they are openly, brazenly cheating to try to put the Democrats in the US Senate. We're going to talk about exactly what's going on there. Even the New York Times is highlighting the fact that Democrat election administrators in Pennsylvania are breaking the law. King of the Swamp says, why hello there. David says, hi Liz. Meredith says, Matt Gaetz is an awesome pick. You know, I would agree with that for reasons that might surprise some people. So we're going to talk about what he's going to do there and if he's going to get confirmed. We're also going to talk about recess appointments. There's some misconceptions even among the right on what recess appointments actually are. So we're going to talk about the process of how that works, because there's a possibility that President Trump or President-elect Trump won't even have to resort to recess appointments. But if he does, we're going to talk about how that works. So I see that some of you are familiar with the Matt Gaetz accusations. Before we get to that, before we get into any of that, let me know if you can hear and see me okay. Let me know where you are, what state you're in, and just make sure that everybody has joined. There's a lot of people still joining, so we want to give everybody a chance to join right in. While we are waiting, the censorship industrial complex is not as happy about Trump's victory as you are, or as I am. They have not stopped their egregious efforts in the wake of President Trump's overwhelming popular vote victory. In fact, they are ramping up their efforts to prevent you from seeing Trump's victories. Trump has been the president-elect for less than 2 weeks, and he already has a significant number of good things that have happened. Obviously, if you have any common sense, if you are not a liar, you know that these things are a result of President Trump's victory. So last week, it was actually about 10 days ago now, I sent out the following tweet, and Politi-Fact has since smacked a fact check on this tweet because it went wildly viral, because we were all celebrating Trump's wins. So I want to show you what I tweeted, and then I want to show you what Politi-Fact said about this, because I think Mark Zuckerberg specifically, I sit here and wonder if Mark Zuckerberg actually knows exactly what's happening on his platform. He seems to be red pilling, the same with Jeff Bezos at the Washington Post. And I wonder if they are aware of what's happening on their platforms and how this works, and who's funding this effort to stop what you could call pro-Trump content, or you could actually just call it objective truth on their platform. So I want to make this very clear what's happening. This is what my tweet said. I said, Trump is president-elect for 2 days. The stock market hits record high. A migrant caravan at our border dissolves. Hamas calls for an end to the war. Bitcoin hits record high. Putin is ready to end the war in Ukraine. Qatar kicks out Hamas leaders. The EU will buy US gas, not Russian gas. Putin will sell oil in US dollars. Zelensky phones Trump and Elon. New York City mayor ends the voucher program for illegal aliens. Mexico to stop migrants at the US border. China wants to work peacefully with us, and big US companies are moving out of China. And I concluded the tweet by saying, I repeat, President Trump has been president-elect for 2 days. So PolitiFact issues a fact check that resulted. This isn't just a fact check like, oh, they wrote some dumb article that they published on their website. They have a partnership with Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram. So if they issue a fact check against content, then it shows up as a false information slide on content that's posted. In this case, it was content that I had posted. I posted a screenshot of this tweet to my Instagram account, and it now has a big false information, misleading, lacking context, fact check tag on the tweet, blocking some of the content. So this is what, if you open up this article, and this is, I actually found this to be quite funny. This is what they say. They go through it claim by claim, and they say, claim, Bitcoin hits record high. And then they say, it's true that Bitcoin, a cryptocurrency, hit record highs the day after Trump's election victory. Oh, so it's actually true. That's true. Then they go to the next claim. Claim, newest migrant caravan breaking up. And they say Reuters reported on November 7th that a large migrant caravan of about 3,000 people dwindled to about 1,600 people after Trump's victory, saying that many of them felt less hopeful of being allowed to stay when Trump takes office in January. Oh, so you're saying that that's true. Those are true. They said, claim, the Taliban wants a new chapter and China wants peaceful coexistence. And they say, well, it's common for foreign countries to congratulate incoming presidents on their victories. As for China, foreign ministry spokeswoman said at a press briefing, we will continue to approach and handle U.S.-China relations based on the principles of mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and a win-win cooperation. Oh, so that's true too. All these fact checks are true. The next claim, they say Russia is ready to speak with the U.S. and Putin is ready to end the Ukraine war. And their fact check reads, Putin, speaking at an event in the Russian city of Sochi, praised Trump and congratulated on his victory. He said, we are ready to have conversations with Trump, and that Trump's claim that he can help end the war in Ukraine deserves attention. So, fact check, true. The next claim, and by the way, they're claiming that this is all false information that I posted, and yet every single claim that they fact check turns out to be true. Claim, Ukraine president in talks with Trump and Elon Musk. This is their fact check. It's premature to frame their communication as being in talks, but Ukrainian President Zelensky spoke with Trump to congratulate him on his victory, and multiple news reports cite unnamed sources say Trump briefly put Elon Musk, a campaign booster, and the new Department of Government Efficiency's co-head on the phone. So the fact check should be true. The next claim, U.S. companies bring production home. They say this is premature. The day after the election, the Wall Street Journal reported that Jim Clayton, the CEO of Breville, an appliance maker with about $1 billion in annual revenue, said it is considering ways to avoid Trump's proposed tariffs by producing more goods in the U.S. So, fact check, true. The next claim, New York City is ending the migrant voucher program. This is their fact check. The city, November 7th, said it was ending a controversial program that provided debit cards for asylum-seeking migrant families staying in city-funded hotels to buy food. So, true. We have yet to find a false one, you will notice. Claim, Qatar kicks out Hamas leaders. Their fact check, this occurred. Okay. So, true. True. Claim, Hamas calls for an end to the war in Gaza. Hamas has been calling, they say as their fact check, for an end to Israeli military action in Gaza in the aftermath of the October 7th Hamas terror attacks in Israel. Hamas's reiteration of these calls means nothing. Okay. So, true what I'm saying, because I said that they called for an end to the war. And claim Mexico to stop migrants at the border. Their fact check is Mexico has been stopping migrants in Mexico since January 2024, and they will continue to do that in the wake of President Trump's victory. So that is every single claim that was on that particular tweet that I am now being penalized on Meta and on Instagram for. Politi-Fact says every single one is true if you actually read what they write. So here's the thing. I was like, who funds this? What is this partnership? I looked into who funds Politi-Fact. Politi-Fact is funded by the Poynter Institute, and they also have direct donations. They list their biggest donors, and look at who are their biggest donors. This is not going to surprise some of you. But I think, again, I wonder if Mark Zuckerberg is aware of this vicious cycle that happens on his platform as he begins to red pill more, as he understands the role that Facebook censorship played in the 2020 election when Facebook stifled the Hunter Biden laptop story at the behest of the US intel community. I wonder if he's aware of what's happening right now on Facebook and on TikTok. So the Poynter Institute gets at least 5% of its funding from Meta. Meta pays PolitiFact to do this, and from TikTok. Okay, so Chinese communists. They also get funding from a man named Chris Newmark. Chris Newmark is a leftist. He is a philanthropist, but he posted, I looked at his Twitter account just to see what his political ideology was. And he posted an article back in 2016 that was encouraging journalists to cover Trump differently, that no longer can journalists be objective in their reporting on Trump, that they need to insert their leftist bias into any coverage of Trump. Okay, so he's not a journalist. He wants activism under the guise of being objective reporting. He gives a lot of money. The Gill Foundation gives a lot of money to Politi-Fact. They push an LGBTQIA agenda. They are queer theorists, and that's what they want in their reporting. The Lumina Foundation, their goal at the Lumina Foundation is equity and racial disparity, and it just goes on and on. On and on. The Joyce Foundation, they push racial equity, gun control. They're against clearing ineligible voters from the voter rolls. These are far leftist individuals and organizations and foundations that are giving money to PolitiFact. And what is PolitiFact doing? They are not saying that any claim that I made is false. They're pretending it's false because they don't like how I'm portraying it. They don't like that I'm saying, oh, President Trump was elected, he was reelected, and these positive things have happened. They are editorializing. And this is where it becomes important that the US Congress pay attention to what's happening here, because President Trump has promised that the US Congress, in concert with the executive branch, will look at Section 230, which essentially says that if you are a publisher or you are a platform that does not editorialize at all, then you don't have any liability for comments made on your site. You are not responsible in any way for content on your site. But if you act as a publisher, if you editorialize, then you are liable for what's published by your organization. And these big tech companies, Facebook, Instagram, I mean, X, of course, although now that Elon Musk is running X, we don't have the same issue over there. But Meta specifically are enjoying protection from liability for what's posted on their platform. But they're not just a platform, they're a publisher, because essentially what this PolitiFact article is doing is they're trying to prevent you from being able to read a list of Trump's accomplishments or good things that happened in the wake of Trump's election. They're trying to prevent you, so they're trying to influence you, and they're funded by all these leftists who just want Trump to fail. And they're editorializing, which makes them a publisher, not a platform, which means that they should not have any protection from the liability that comes with being a platform and not editorializing. So some people, suffice to say, are not as happy about Trump's victory as you and I are. Okay, let's talk about Matt Gaetz. We're going to talk about Matt Gaetz and what exactly is behind the accusations against him, and this timeline that shows you exactly how the swamp works and why they're so obsessively angry about his appointment. We're going to get to that in just a second. So obviously, in case it wasn't already clear, the forces that are trying to suppress the truth have not stopped in our country. If anything, in the wake of Trump's election, they're doubling down. And now more than ever, you and I need to stand firm. We need to push harder. We need to ensure that the truth has a voice. Our independent platform here at Blaze TV is your ally in this fight, offering fearless political analysis, real stories, and a healthy dose of camaraderie to keep us all grounded together. But we cannot do this alone. We need you in this battle with us. Together, we can push back against the lies and champion the principles that make America great. If you haven't joined us already, now is the time. Become a Blaze TV member today and gain access to the arsenal of truth that we have built just for you. This is your home, your family, your front line in the ongoing fight for freedom and integrity. The next chapter starts now. Just go to blazetv.com/Wheeler and get $30 off. If you love this show and you support what Blaze TV stands for, this is your chance to get even more involved in something special. That's blazetv.com/Wheeler for $30 off. Okay, so recess appointments. Let's talk about that for a second before we even get to the Matt Gaetz stuff, because if these nominees, the people that Trump has nominated for his cabinet positions, are approved during a recess of Congress, then there's not going to be a fight over any of them. That's kind of the point. There wouldn't be the hearings, the questionings, or the confirmation vote from senators. They would just be gavelled through, essentially. But this isn't quite as simple as it may sound. It's not a matter of, oh, okay, Congress goes home for Christmas, Trump just pushes them through. Allowing senators to vote on these things is just a courtesy, but any president at any time could always do recess appointments. It's not quite as simple as that. So let's back up for a second and start with Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell, as Senate Majority Leader still until the next Congress gavels in late January of 2025, Mitch McConnell yesterday was reported to have said that, quote, there will be no recess appointments. Now, the woman that reported this is a woman by the name of Jane Mayer. She works for The New Yorker. And this post obviously got attention. It caught on fire because this is a very significant thing for Mitch McConnell to say. We know Mitch McConnell hates Trump. We know that he spent his entire tenure as Senate Majority Leader being an obstructionist to Trump. But this would be a significant move in the face of even his constituents, since Trump has such a mandate from the American people, not just the Electoral College, but the popular vote, to push the Trump agenda through. If Mitch McConnell stood in his way, it wouldn't just be a Mitch McConnell versus Donald Trump. It's Mitch McConnell versus the entire population of the Republican Party. Well, the thing is, Jane Mayer posted this quote from McConnell, but then she deleted the post without explanation. The post had been viewed about 243,000 times at the time of deletion. So when someone deletes a post like this, you wonder, well, was this accurate reporting? Was this inaccurate reporting? What would cause you to delete something like this? Because a reporter posting something like this usually wants it to go viral. It's kind of the reporter's dream here. So maybe McConnell didn't say this, or there's a possibility he was saying there would be no need for recess appointments because the Senate intends to vote in favor of who President Trump appoints. We don't know. We don't know. Here's the thing. Senator Mitch McConnell, as majority leader of the US Senate, has some power over recess appointments, but he doesn't have all the power over recess appointments. The process is a bit complicated. So right now, what generally happens around the holidays and before the new incoming Congress comes to Washington, D.C., is Congress doesn't often go into a recess of both houses. Oftentimes there are pro forma sessions. That's the norm now, where some members stay and someone gavels in and gavels out every day if almost the entire Congress isn't forced to stay because there's some legislative battle that they're trying to fight over Christmas time. It's not the norm anymore for there to be a joint adjournment of Congress. And it's not just a matter of, okay, the Senate Majority Leader and the House Majority Leader need to, or the Speaker of the House, I should say, call a recess. That could happen. And it seems that Mike Johnson is on board with the Trump agenda. So as Speaker of the House, he could call a recess of the House. But what about the Senate? What about the Senate? It's not quite as simple as just McConnell calling a recess of the Senate or Thune calling a recess of the Senate if this is after, if this recess is after they've been sworn in, because even if the Senate Majority Leader, a Republican, called for the adjournment of the Senate, any Democrat senator could filibuster that. So it's not just up to the Senate Majority Leader to decide whether or not the Senate goes into recess. It's a matter of, okay, well, Senate Democrats would have to shrug their shoulders and agree to that. The only way around that would be for the Republican majority in the Senate to do away with the adjournment resolution filibuster. So it kind of gets into this wonky congressional procedural stuff. And it's not impossible. It's good to know that there are options of this kind, but it's not as simple as simply, okay, push Trump's nominees through. Now, if Trump, after his inauguration, he does have an Article 2 power to force both houses of Congress to adjourn. And if he used that Article 2 power from the US Constitution after both houses of Congress have been in recess for 10 days, then he could push recess appointments through. I personally hope this doesn't happen. I personally hope that we don't have to resort to recess appointments because it is more complicated than it seems. I think one of the things that we're seeing right now is, we can pull this up on the screen actually. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, has been pulled into the bro group. He's been pulled into President Trump's inner circle, and you could see this at the UFC. It was Elon Musk, it was Joe Rogan, it was RFK, it was Tulsi Gabbard, it was Chris Pavlovsky, it was Don Jr., and who's there in the middle? It is Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson is there right in the middle, and this is a good thing because you can see all those pictures. Yeah, they're there on the screen. It's pretty cool to see the whole group of them. Kid Rock is there, Vivek is there. Dana White is there. This whole powerful group. It's actually crazy to see all these guys in the same room at the same time, given how much power and influence they have in our country right now. But what is President Trump doing? President Trump is using the power of influence to bring Speaker of the House Mike Johnson closer to the Trump agenda than Mike Johnson was. And this is a point that I think is important to be made and important for us to understand as conservatives. There's a difference between a never Trump ideologue who is on the right and someone who is just used to comfort. Mitt Romney as an example, would be someone who is a never Trump ideologue. It doesn't matter how much you pitch him on policy or how pleasant you are to him. He is ideologically committed to being against Trump. But Mike Johnson, while you and I have been fairly unhappy, I think it's fair to say, about his tenure as Speaker of the House, he's not a never Trump ideologue. He's just comfortable. He's more comfortable following process and procedure. He's not comfortable. He's uncomfortable with disruption. But the best way to bring someone like that into the fold is to literally bring someone like that into the fold. You can feud with him as much as you want on Fox News airwaves, or you can try to pull power moves against him on the U.S. or on the U.S. House of Representatives, or you can just invite him to go with the bros to UFC. Which way do you think is going to be more likely to bring this guy into the fold? Well, I would argue the latter. I would argue making him part of the cool kids crowd is a brilliant move of President Trump, and it's going to make it more likely that President Trump's nominees are gavelled through. If it's recess appointments, that Mike Johnson would be willing to do that. I know that he doesn't have the confirmation vote. He doesn't have the confirmation vote that the Senate does. Okay, so all that being said, we get to these nominations for cabinet positions from President Trump, and I got to tell you guys, I'm all about these disruptive picks. I am all about the Pete Hegseths and the Matt Gaetzes at secretary levels of the US government, and I'll tell you why. It's not because I necessarily agree with their personal lives, it's because I don't care about their personal life. That's not what I'm looking for in a secretary of the Department of Defense and in an attorney general of the United States. I couldn't care less about their personal life history. But let's talk about Matt Gaetz's the accusations against him, because this is going to be the reason that a lot of senators, if there are some Republican senators who won't vote for confirmation for Matt Gaetz, the reason that they're going to give is because of these ethics complaints about Matt Gaetz. But once you dive into these ethics complaints, they're not exactly what they seem, except as an explanation of why we need Matt Gaetz at the DOJ. So let's get to that in just a second. Guys, in all the time that we have been alive, the US dollar has always been the primary currency. But what if this is not the case much longer? We have this globalist elite who seeks to control us. In this case, the United Nations, in our country, in New York City, just a couple weeks before the election, passed a resolution that would bring a digital currency here to the United States. Now, let's not camouflage what a digital currency would mean. It would mean that these elites are controlling us by using our money. We wouldn't be allowed to purchase certain things if they didn't approve of it. We would be forced to donate to certain things. We know that this would happen because we saw it happen in Canada. The trucker convoy, the Freedom Convoy, those people had their bank accounts frozen because they dared to dissent from the vaccine mandate and the lockdown in Canada. Of course, that's going to happen here if we allow these globalists to impose a digital dollar on us. That's why I got to tell you, it's never been more important than to take control over your wealth, to protect your wealth. You can't let your life savings become a casualty of either failing banks or currency wars. Now is the time to call the only precious metal dealer that I trust, American Hartford Gold. They'll show you how to protect your savings, your retirement accounts, by diversifying your wealth portfolio with physical gold and silver. My husband and I recently did this. A portion of our portfolio is now in physical gold and silver. It's more secure. We feel confident that this will be with us and not used to control us for the future, for our children's future. And American Hartford Gold is a fabulous company. They support content like this that's committed to bringing you the truth. Tell them I sent you. They'll give you up to $15,000 of free silver on your first order. Call them now. You can click the link in the description of this episode, or you can call 866-996-5172. That's 866-996-5172. Or you can text my name, Liz, to 998899. Okay. Let's get to Matt Gaetz. So what do we think of Matt Gaetz as Attorney General? You can drop your comments right here in the chat box. I want to hear. Are you delighted by this? Do you think that he is just the disruptor we need? Do you think that it's just a funny troll, like Fetterman said, God-level troll of Donald Trump to put Gaetz in the AG? Are you a little skeptical of Gaetz because of the accusations that have been made against him? What are you feeling about Matt Gaetz as AG? I will tell you. I don't care much for his personal reputation. Matt Gaetz has been married for a couple years now to a lovely young woman named Ginger. I don't know anything about their marriage. And with all due respect, this is politics. I don't really care that much about their marriage. I wish them well. I hope it's a lovely, healthy, holy marriage, but I don't care about their marriage. I know it was an open secret in Washington, D.C., that in the years prior to his marriage, Matt Gaetz had a reputation as a playboy. He had a reputation of getting around. He had a reputation of, you know, of liking the party scene. And I mean, you know me, I'm a good Catholic girl. I don't approve of that sort of behavior, but I'm not looking for Matt Gaetz to to date my sister. I'm not looking for Matt Gaetz to be my pastor. His personal reputation doesn't really have a lot to do with his competence as Attorney General. So I don't care that much about his personal reputation. Some people are surprised to hear that because they know that I'm Catholic. They know that I think that we need to insert morality back into our culture, and we do. And I certainly, on a personal level, encourage everybody to behave morally. I think it's better for them here on earth, certainly better for them in eternity. But again, I don't really care about that when it comes to whether someone is politically suited or competent for their political position. Matt Gaetz is also, kind of a madman. He's kind of a crazy guy. He just doesn't care what other people think of him. He seems to have a unique characteristic that very few people in politics have. And when there is someone in politics who embodies this characteristic, I have mad respect for it. And that characteristic is he just doesn't care if people in power criticize him. He is unafraid to disrupt the status quo. The other thing about Matt Gaetz, and this is not even getting into his accusations yet, we're about to get to those, is Matt Gaetz is an incredibly sharp attorney. Some people forget that he's an attorney at all, but this was Matt Gaetz going toe to toe with Merrick Garland in the House of Representatives. Take a look at this.
You can clear it all up for us right now. Will the Department of Justice provide to the committee all documents, all correspondence between the department and Alvin Bragg's office and Fonnie Willis's office and Letitia James's office?
The offices you're referring to are independent offices of state.
I get that. The question is whether or not you will provide all of your documents and correspondence. That's the question. I don't need a history lesson.
Well, I'm going to say again, we do not control those offices. They make their own decisions.
The question is whether you communicate with them, not whether you control them. Do you communicate with them, and will you provide those communications?
If you make a request, we'll refer it to our Office of Legislative Affairs.
But see, here's the thing. You come in here and you lodge this attack that it's a conspiracy theory, that there is coordinated lawfare against Trump. And then when we say, fine, just give us the documents, give us the correspondence, and then if it's a conspiracy theory, that will be evident. But when you say, well, we'll take your request, and then we'll sort of work it through the DOJ's accommodation process, then you're actually advancing the very dangerous conspiracy theory that you're concerned about. Now, you were a judge, once nominated to the highest court in our country. When you were a judge, I'm just curious, did you ever make political donations to partisan candidates?
No.
No, and you didn't because that would create the potential appearance of impropriety.
I didn't because there's a federal rule barring federal judges from making contributions.
Right, but under that same theory of attacks on the judicial process, like, shouldn't someone be owed like a jury of their peers and a judge that's non-biased rather than getting a judge from your political opponent's donor file?
I'm well aware that you're not asking a hypothetical. You're asking me to comment on a jury verdict in another jurisdiction which has to be respected. I won't comment on it. That case is still ongoing. The defendant
Mr. Attorney General, I hadn't asked you about the verdict yet. We were getting there. I was talking about the judge. And so let me ask you this question about your time as a judge. Was there ever a time when you were a judge when you had a family member who was personally profiting off of the notoriety of a case that was before your court?
I'm going to say again, it's very clear you're asking me to comment on a case in another jurisdiction.
No, wait, hold on, Mr. Attorney General. Did you ever have a family member profit off of the notoriety of any case that you sat over?
Say again, you're asking
yes or no?
You're asking me to comment on a case currently.
Well, it seems you're connecting the dots, Mr. Attorney General. I'm just asking you as to a general principle.
Okay,
but you
so there's
are
about 12
aware
minutes
that
of
Judge
this.
Merchan's.
And Matt Gaetz utterly destroys Merrick Garland. People forget that Matt Gaetz is an attorney, and he's a very sharp attorney. not just on the House of Representatives, but he's going to bring this to the Department of Justice. So now we talked about his personal life. We've talked about his ability, his competence. Now let's talk about the final points that some senators are going to raise when it comes to Matt Gaetz as an excuse not to vote for him. Well, this final point is that Matt Gaetz has faced accusations. Whenever he's mentioned in the mainstream media, for example, he's always mentioned as being under ethics review by the US House or having faced sex trafficking allegations. So, what is all that about? Did he face sex trafficking allegations? Was it true? Who started this? Is he guilty of that? It's a very serious allegation. Matt Gaetz was elected to Congress back in 2016. He started serving his term in January of 2017. Now, people in Washington, D.C. don't like Matt Gaetz. They don't like him personally. He was kind of a playboy. They don't love that. Sort of weird looking character. He's kind of obnoxious. They don't like that. He's not a well-liked person. Immediately, though, he started to stand out, even though he was a freshman, because he was a fighter for Trump right off the bat, a fighter against the establishment. He butted heads almost as soon as he got into Congress with people like Paul Ryan, people like Kevin McCarthy, other GOPers who are establishment GOPers. He started picking fights with them in both word and deed. So almost immediately, as he started his service in Congress, he's disliked by the establishment, professionally and personally. And what happens in Washington, D.C., when you're disliked by the establishment is that makes you a target. So in 2020, fast forward just a couple of years, the FBI begins investigating Matt Gaetz for allegedly having a relationship with a minor, a 17-year-old girl, they said, and paying for her to travel over state lines. Now, if an allegation like this is true, then that's the definition of sex trafficking. So that's where the sex trafficking allegations come into play. The allegation is that a 17-year-old girl was moved over state. He paid for her travel to cross state lines and he had sex with her. Now, is this true? We'll get to that in a second. So where did the FBI get this idea? Who told them that Gaetz needed to be investigated for sex trafficking? Who made this allegation? Well, it came from a man by the name of Joel Greenberg. Joel Greenberg is a former Seminole County tax collector in the state of Florida who claimed to be a close personal friend of Matt Gaetz. He said that he was his longtime associate professionally. Now, to substantiate this, Greenberg posted a selfie of Gaetz and Roger Stone, the political operative. So some thought that, okay, this guy might have credibility. But in 2020, Greenberg himself was indicted by the Department of Justice. And in 2021, Greenberg pleaded guilty to 6 felony counts of, what do you accuse Gaetz of? Sex trafficking, wire fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, and stalking. He's currently carrying out an 11-year sentence. Suffice to say, this guy, Joel Greenberg, is not a good guy at all. So what happens in the wake of this? Well, Gaetz was investigated by the Department of Justice for 2 years over the claims that Greenberg made about Gaetz. And along the way, there's a weird tangent here. Along the way, Gaetz says that he and his dad were the victims or were targeted for extortion. Somebody tried to extort his father for $25 million. At the time that Gaetz came out and made this extortion scheme public, a lot of people were like, what is he talking about? What is going on? Well, guess what? Gaetz was right. That's exactly what happened. A businessman by the name of Stephen Alford, he's 62 years old, told Gaetz's dad that he could essentially make the DOJ investigation of Gaetz go away if Gaetz's dad paid him $25 million. The dictionary definition of extortion. Well, Gaetz and his dad instead cooperated with the local FBI office, and it resulted in Alford's arrest, and he pled guilty to extortion. So now we're at 2022. The Department of Justice, Joe Biden's Department of Justice, announced that they would not be bringing any charges against Gaetz. Remember, all this time, the allegations were never charges against Gaetz. They were allegations that a private citizen made that resulted in a Department of Justice investigation, an investigation that ultimately did not bring any charges against Gaetz. In fact, they closed the investigation. Why? Well, because the 2 people making the accusation, Joel Greenberg and then this unnamed underage girl, were found to be non-credible. In other words, they were such bad liars that even the Biden Department of Justice thought there's no way that these 2 could be believable. And this is the Biden Department of Justice. The Biden Department of Justice that invents things in order to target their political enemy, will grasp at the slightest hair to target their political enemy. There was so much nothing to these allegations that even the Biden DOJ dropped them. Even the Biden Department of Justice dropped this investigation with no charges. Now, what should be noted is that in 2021, the Democrat-controlled House opened an ethics investigation into Matt Gaetz. It subsequently paused that investigation while the Department of Justice investigated Gaetz. Well, in 2022, the GOP retains control of the House. Kevin McCarthy, you'll remember, was elected Speaker after a long and drawn-out battle. Anti-establishment, arguably pro-Trump Republicans held out to demand a series of reforms before McCarthy got the votes, including that any single member of the House of Representatives could motion to vacate the chair, which means bring it to a vote to oust the current Speaker. And who led that fight? Well, that fight was led by Matt Gaetz. So, Kevin McCarthy hates Matt Gaetz. In July of 2023, the McCarthy-led House revived the ethics investigation. In October of 2023, Matt Gaetz motioned to vacate the chair, and McCarthy became the first speaker in U.S. history to be ousted. Now, Kevin McCarthy claims that Matt Gaetz did this to squash the ethics investigation into him. Gaetz claims it's because McCarthy was failing to uphold his promises. And now here we are in 2024. Matt Gaetz is nominated by President-elect Trump to be Attorney General of the Department of Justice of the United States of America. Matt Gaetz resigns from the U.S. Congress, and according to House rules, that means the ethics investigation cannot be released publicly. So what do we make of these accusations against Matt Gaetz? They're personal, they're petty, they're political grievances. But what's worse is it never mattered to those making the accusations if they were true or not. It never mattered if he got his day in court. It never mattered if he was officially found guilty or not guilty. The goal of these accusations from the beginning was character assassination of the worst kind, a smear campaign from the depths of hell. And just like when Twitter of old banned Alex Jones from the platform because those that ran Twitter knew that a lot of mainstream conservatives wouldn't want to come to Alex Jones's defense because he was saying a lot of crazy stuff about Sandy Hook, and we didn't want to be associated with that. So they used Alex Jones to move the Overton window. They thought if we can silence Alex Jones, then the next person we silence is going to come a little easier and a little easier until mainstream conservatives are silenced too. That's what's happening with Matt Gaetz. They're counting on you not coming to Matt Gaetz's defense because he's got kind of weird eyebrows. He's kind of promiscuous and everyone knew it. He's a disruptor. He's an attack dog. He's obnoxious. But let me tell you, if we don't debunk this, not only is it our moral duty to do so if someone's facing a false accusation, but make no mistake, if we don't debunk this now, the Overton window will move closer and closer to us. And this could happen to any one of us too. Matt Gaetz is a disruptor. People have concerns about things he says and things he does, and I share some of those concerns. But this is not a time to put nice people in charge of corrupt institutions. We tried our Mr. Nice Guy with Mike Pence, and look what we got. This is the time to send in a politician who is completely disassociated with the polite society that Democrats tell us are the norm. This is a time to send in the attack dog. Send in the madman. Set him loose in the Department of Justice. The reason President Trump nominated Matt Gaetz for Attorney General is to rip that place apart. I don't know about you, but I have full confidence that Matt Gaetz is the man to do it. All right, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think, and then we're going to turn to Pennsylvania. There's weird things happening in Pennsylvania, but the thing is, the election cheating that's going on right now in Pennsylvania is not that complicated. It's actually shocking in how elementary it is. My producer Tim and I were talking about this when we were briefing the scripts before the show, because we were like, oh, there's actually not a lot of nuance to what's happening. This actually is how the New York Times describes it. And I want to read it to you from the New York Times because it's just so much fun to see the New York Times admit that the Democrats are cheating in elections. This is what they wrote. In Pennsylvania, in at least 4 counties, Bucks, Philadelphia, Center, and Montgomery, local election officials are acting in open defiance of a ruling from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court that arrived weeks before the election. The court found that mail ballots that are missing the date on the outer envelope or have the wrong date cannot be counted for this election. The Bucks County Election Commission felt differently. This is Robert Harvey Jr., the chairman of the board and a Democrat. This happened during a meeting on Tuesday where the board voted 2-1 to count over 400 ballots with date errors on the envelope. He said, it's a pretty stupid thing to not count someone's vote simply because they didn't date an envelope for a ballot. He said election officials know when ballots were printed for voters, making the outer envelope date requirement meaningless. He goes, this law needs to be changed. The commissioners were advised that they were likely to be sued no matter how they ruled, so we're going to get sued either way. I'd rather be on the side of counting ballots than not counting them. So let's just pause right there in this New York Times piece. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court said it's against the law to count these ballots, but the local election administrator says, I don't agree with that law. I'm probably going to get sued anyway, so I'm going to do what I want and break the law. It's actually as simple as that. The election cheating that's happening in Pennsylvania, they're admitting to. For the love of God, prosecute these people. Put them in prison for meddling in our elections. This is another Democrat member of the Bucks County Board. Her name's Diane Ellis Marseglia. She said 2 days after voting to count the ballots with misdated envelopes, 2 days after voting to count the ballots with misdated envelopes, she said, I think we all know that precedent by a court doesn't matter anymore in this country. People violate laws anytime they want. Okay. Yeah, if you're a Democrat, that is the precedent that's been set in this country. But let me tell you, that precedent is about to change. For example, wait until Matt Gaetz becomes Attorney General at the Department of Justice. Do you think you want to be engaging in election cheating at that point? I would highly, highly advise you not to. Now, keep in mind that these ballots benefit Bob Casey. The race is Bob Casey versus Dave McCormick. Bob Casey is a Democrat. These are Democrat elected officials who are admitting that they are breaking the law. They are openly defying the state Supreme Court. The question is, what are they going to do about it? We have John Fetterman, senator from Pennsylvania, actually defending the cheating because he doesn't think it's a lot of cheating. He just thinks it's a little cheating. So it's all right, according to Fetterman. Take a look at this.
Behind Dave McCormick, Democratic officials in at least one key county, Bucks County, voted to count about 115 provisional ballots that are missing a signature, despite the Pennsylvania Supreme Court previously ruling that those are invalid. I want you to take a listen to how one Democratic Bucks County commissioner justified her actions.
I think we all know that precedent by a court doesn't matter anymore in this country, and people violate laws anytime they want. So for me, if I violate this law, it's because I want a court to pay attention to it.
So the Washington Post editorial board called that, quote, corrosive to democracy, unquote, and said, quote, county officials do not get to decide whether a legal requirement is material and must be followed. Courts do, and they have spoken clearly, unquote. What's your take? What's your response to that Democratic official deliberately announcing that they're going to defy court orders and count these provisional ballots?
Well, again, I'm not going to chase every kinds of quotes, things like that, because I think you just pointed out that it refers to about 115 ballots, and that's not going to have an impact on this race at this point. So where we are now? It's very, very close, and I guarantee you, if Dave McCormick were in the opposite situation.
Wait a second. So it's very, very close, according to Fetterman, but several hundred. He's not even correct that it's 115. It's over 400 ballots. Wouldn't make a difference. You can't have it both ways, Mr. Fetterman. You can't have it both ways. But that's not even the material point here. The material point is that there are laws that we are required to follow in the administration of our elections. If you do not follow those laws, if you openly defy those laws, you are breaking the law. You are a criminal, and you should be prosecuted for that. And it's ironic to me that the Democrats who told us that they care so much about democracy are the ones now absolutely dismissing it because it doesn't go their way. Bananas. And to all the Democrats, all the leftists on X, the day after the election, who are telling us, are you going to recant your worry, your fear was unfounded that there was going to be electioneering and cheating and rigging? No, not going to recant it. We're going to highlight this because make no mistake, if this would have happened all over the country had not Laura Trump been ready with her cadre of lawyers to make sure that every shady thing the Democrats tried to pull was litigated instantly before it could impact the outcome of the election. And of course, the fact that Trump won in such a landslide that there wasn't a margin of cheating. By the way, we're going to talk to Laura Trump on the show later this week because I want to hear the behind the scenes of everything that she did. She's one of the unsung heroes of Trump's victory. Everything she did to be a bulwark against this kind of cheating. She'll be on the show, I believe, on Friday. We're syncing schedules right now, and we'll keep you updated. Okay, we have a couple of headlines for you today. Headlines, this is just a funny one. So the New York Times issued a fact check. The New York Times is beside themselves that RFK Jr. has been nominated by Trump to lead HHS. RFK is one of his most recent, I won't even call it claims because it's just true, is that Froot Loops has different ingredients in the United States compared to Canada or compared to Europe, and that the US version of Froot Loops has harmful chemicals in it. And he said, why? Why are we different? And the New York Times tried to issue a fact check. This is what they said, and I quote, Mr. Kennedy has singled out Froot Loops as an example of a product with too many artificial ingredients, questioning why the Canadian version has fewer than the US version. But he was wrong. The ingredient list is roughly the same, although Canada's has natural colorings made from blueberries and carrots, while the US product contains red dye 40, yellow 5, and blue 1, as well as butylated hydroxytoluene, or BHT, a lab-made chemical that is used, quote, for freshness, according to the ingredient label. So the ingredient list is roughly the same, except Canada's has natural colorings made from food, while the US has all these chemicals that are harmful and poisonous and cause cancer. Okay. Don't you just love fact checks that aren't? First Politi-Fact against us, and now the New York Times against RFK. We all know the truth. So Oprah was paid by the Kamala Harris campaign for Kamala Harris to appear on Oprah's show. And it was funny because after this news broke, someone said, listen, Kamala paid $1 million for Oprah's endorsement. Oprah was stopped on the street. She was out for a walk in her neighborhood in California. And some reporter walks up to her and said, is this true? And she says, no, it's not true. I was not paid $1 million. Well, the FEC filings show that Oprah was lying. The Kamala Harris campaign paid Oprah's production company, it's called Harpo Productions, $1 million in two installments, two $500,000 installments. And after she was caught, Oprah said, oh, well, that was just the cost of the production of the show. Okay, listen, I've worked in this business for a long time. Productions can be pricey, but one episode, $1 million? I don't think so. And now, according to the New York Times, two sources that are close to Kamala Harris and her campaign say, actually, it wasn't just $1 million. It was $2.5 million that Kamala paid for Oprah's endorsement. This was uncovered by the Washington Examiner. This is not normal. This is so egregious. If I were a donor, especially a small dollar donor, a regular everyday American who donated my hard-earned money to Kamala Harris, I would be infuriated. It's also kind of encouraging, though, from a political standpoint, that celebrity endorsements don't have the impact that they once had. Oprah was paid to endorse Kamala Harris, and it just didn't make any difference. Did not make any difference. Okay, up in Massachusetts, if you look at an electoral map of which county voted for Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump, the map is almost entirely red. We really don't have a situation in our country anymore where it's red states and blue states. There are red states, and there are mostly red states. We don't have blue states anymore. We have blue counties, except for one state in the United States, and that state is Massachusetts. Massachusetts, every county in that state went blue for Kamala Harris, but there's been some additional drama up there. An additional drama. There's a Democrat representative from Massachusetts named Seth Moulton, who has some harsh words for his colleagues in the wake of this absolute shellacking that President Trump delivered to the Democrats. He said, quote, Democrats spend way too much time trying not to offend anyone. He said outright that he doesn't think that boys who identify as girls should play on girls' sports teams. He said, I have 2 little girls. I don't want them getting run over on a playing field by a male or formerly male athlete. But as a Democrat, I know I'm supposed to be afraid to say that. Well, Mr. Moulton, you're right. You're reasonable. You're correct. You shouldn't be afraid to say that. Well, what happened after this Democrat congressman made this comment? Democrats were outraged. People actually called for Seth Moulton to resign from Congress. And to his credit, I give him a lot of credit for this, actually. He continued to defend his comments. He said, I stand by them because, importantly, I'm just trying to raise the debate. I'm not saying I have all the answers on this. It's not my area of expertise. But this is an example of a contentious issue that we have to be willing to take on as a Democratic Party. 1, we got to start winning elections, and we're losing on issues like this. And 2, if we don't actually define the terms of the debate, then Trump and the extremist Republicans, like you and me, will define it all for the rest of us. So reasonable on some things, not perfect, but reasonable. Now, the reason he's bringing this up is because there was a survey done after the election that showed that independent voters who broke for Trump at the last minute did so because of Kamala Harris's stance on transgenderism. Kamala Harris wants to use your tax dollars to trans illegal aliens in prison. She's totally fine with kids being transed at school by teachers and parents not being told. And that was a turnoff. People don't want, whether you're Democrat or Republican, the majority of people in our country don't want boys playing in girls' sports. So this Democrat congressman was like, maybe we shouldn't take on a position that the majority of even our own voters not only hate, but find to be important. As a result, he's being punished. On Sunday, hundreds of people in Moulton's hometown of Salem showed up to protest. They called it a Neighbors Against Hate rally, and they said it was to celebrate trans and queer people. They said that the aim for their event is to communicate loud and clear that we love and stand in solidarity with the trans community on the North Shore. And it was held right outside of his Moulton's Salem, Massachusetts downtown office, which is kind of funny. As my friend Ryan Gerdusky quipped, a witch burning in Salem. Original. But here's the thing, even Jen Psaki is saying that Democrats need to actually embrace the trans issue and go more full throttle on this than they already have. Take a look at this.
There's obviously a lot of soul searching right now going on within the Democratic Party, and that's a good thing. But what I worry about is that in the course of all that soul searching, some Democrats might reach the wrong sweeping conclusions. And there are a lot of issues that fall into that bucket. But one in particular that stuck out to me is transgender rights. Republicans spent hundreds of millions of dollars on anti-trans ads this election cycle, including one that showed Vice President Harris talking about government funding for gender-reaffirming care for prisoners and detainees. If that sounds like a particularly obscure issue, it is, because it applies to a tiny group of people. And it's also a policy that, by the way, was in place during the first Trump presidency. Another one of the lines that ran over and over again in those ads and throughout right-wing media is this idea that America is faced with a crisis of boys playing in girls' sports. Now, these ads created this perception that the issues of trans kids playing sports was dominating schools across the country, which is completely false. Some people got pulled into that argument. Reflection is good, but if that were actually an issue at thousands of schools across the country, it would be worthy of a debate. But there are just incredibly few examples of transgender girls playing in youth sports. And when we see those examples, there isn't evidence that these kids are a threat to safety or fairness.
Incredibly few examples, like the United Nations study they recently released that showed that, and this is at the championship level. This isn't even at lower levels of sports. This is just elite sports. Women, biological women, real women, lost over 900 medals because men who identify as women were competing in women's sports and defeated the real women. But God forbid the Democrat Party move away from how egregious this is. The further down this path that Democrats go, though, the better for Republicans. More Democrat voters are going to vote Republican. But more importantly, mark my words on this, the more Democrat politicians will become Republican too, like Tulsi and like RFK and high-profile figures like Elon Musk and Joe Rogan. More Democrats will become Republican the further down this path Democrats go. So I don't want them to go down this path, but it will backfire on them. So be my guest. There's been a report that Trump's transition team is compiling a list of U.S. military officers for possible court-martial in the wake of Biden's botched withdrawal from Afghanistan and the horrific death of 13 U.S. service members. And my reaction to this is absolutely they should be court-martialed. Every U.S. military general or high-ranking officer was fully aware of the ramifications that withdrawing from Afghanistan the way that Biden did, what those ramifications would be. They knew it would result in the death of U.S. service members, and they knew it was being done for political reasons. No U.S. general should have done this. No U.S. military officer, high-ranking in a position of power, should have agreed to be part of this. They should have resigned their commissions versus taking part in what Biden thought was a political stunt. And here's the thing. We all wish that we were past the era where court-martials were a thing, where this kind of retaliation had to happen. But it's a deterrent. If we are going to course correct in our country, if we are actually going to operate by norms, then there has to be an incentive for norms to be followed. And part of that incentive is a deterrence. It means holding to account people who have violated those norms in such a gross, egregious, and deadly way. So bring on the list of U.S. military officers who deserve a court-martial over this, because the U.S. public, we the people, we care about the 13 U.S. service members who were killed that day in Afghanistan. And our final headline for the day, this is a funny one. This is a lighter one. There's a cruise line that's offering an quote-unquote escape from the Trump presidency. They are selling 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, and yes, even 4 year long packages where you can leave the United States, go on a cruise. You can traverse to 425 ports across 140 countries over the course of a year, and you do not have to suffer the consequences of Trump being president here in the United States. Instead, you can be cramped up on a cruise ship with a billion other people who are angry and eating food that's probably old and disgusting, getting all the germs that come with being on a cruise ship, but you can escape the economic prosperity, the thriving economy, the hope that's come with the Trump presidency if you so choose. It'll cost you just shy of 40 grand a year. If you've got that kind of money, if you've got the luxury to go on that kind of cruise and you hate Donald Trump, then maybe this opportunity, maybe it's for you. It's hard to believe something like that is real, but according to The Guardian, it is very, very real. Very, very real. All right, guys, make sure you subscribe to the show. Go to Apple Podcasts, subscribe, go to Spotify, subscribe. I love doing these lives with you. It's fun to hear your reactions in the comment sections as we go along. So thank you for doing this today. Thank you, as always, for watching. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.